Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today in the studio I have the wonderful Kristian Crowe. Kristian is a fun-loving mover and shaker who's been practicing yoga for over 20 years. Introduced to the practice by his Auntie Tracy in his teenage years, Kristian's journey weaves through a decade in the performing arts into deep explorations of different types of yoga. His teaching style is grounded in a reverence for the body as a powerful vehicle for presence, while also drawing from his unique background in movement to inspire curiosity, fluidity, and strength. As his practice deepened, Kristian became captivated by the philosophies behind the poses, immersing himself in traditions that sparked a deep dive into meditation and devotional practices. Today, he's passionate about bringing these ancient teachings into modern life in a way that's both pragmatic and profound. At the heart of his work is community and creating a space of connection, shared growth, and remembrance. Meditation, he says, has been the most transformative part of his journey, and he's on a mission to share its power with the world. Now, Kristian has been a teacher of mine for over 5 years now, and I am just beyond excited to bring this conversation to you guys here today. So, Kristian, without any further delay, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me here.
It's such a pleasure. It's just so nice. I feel like I've had you in the back of my mind for years wanting to get you on the show, and I've never really mentioned it to you before. I think I always just wait until it feels like the right time, and then I just, you recently came and joined my retreat and held an incredible session with the women there. And I thought to myself, yeah, we've got to make this happen. So I'm really, really excited to get going today.
Me too.
Without any further delay, let's kick it off with some nice, easy questions. This allows the audience to get to know you a bit better. And I'd love to start off with, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Okay, so I live just around the corner.
Yeah, not far.
In Elsternwick. Actually, recently I got back from 3 months in Japan, and I ended up meeting someone over there, and we kind of joined forces, and we've opened an ashram. An ashram is essentially a place where people come to engage in practices that bring them into deeper relationship with themselves. And so life has changed.
Just a little.
Just a little bit since getting back. So yeah, we're in Elsternwick at Sukha Ashram, which is really beautiful. We have me, my partner, Brahman, who heads up the ashram, and then 2 other roommates, one of which I actually grew up dancing with since I was 12, which is amazing. So just reconnecting. And what does an average day look like for me? Oh, wow. It'll always begin with meditation, some kind of movement practice, whether that's going to the gym, practicing yoga asana. I usually teach in the morning, whether that's like a group class or a private, and then I'll do some kind of devotional practice. In the ashram, we have ceremonies or rituals that we run in the temple space. And then in the afternoon, it's usually a little bit more spacious. I usually cook for myself, for my partner, who is running massages out of a room in the ashram, little massage parlor. You've got one with him before, haven't you?
I haven't, and I absolutely need to. I absolutely need to get there.
Oh, he's amazing. He's fabulous.
Yes.
His hands are as big as my entire body, so it really works. And then towards the end of the day, usually spend time with my doggo. Usually with the doggo, trying to get out in nature, going to the beach, often walk along the Yarra. And the end of the day, I usually try to prioritize some kind of social connection, connecting with the roommates, with friends, with community. And then on an ideal day, I'd be like getting ready for bed and jumping in and doing some before bed practices at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. That's a really good day.
Yeah, right. That's what we aim for, but potentially don't land at.
Sometimes it's a little bit later. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
We're flexible.
That's important.
And the last question?
What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I dance.
Yeah,
I love
you do.
to dance. I love connecting with friends. I'm very sociable. And, I have spent somewhat of the last 5 years in a really deep introspective space. And since returning home, it's kind of been like, let's do the opposite. It's like, so you can meditate. So what? You know, I'm not trying to get better at sitting down and closing my eyes. I'm trying to get better at life. And so since returning home, you know, I just want to kind of put the meditation to the test. And so I've been finding myself in environments and circumstances that before potentially felt a little edgy for me and maybe not resonant. And ever since returning home, it's like, well, how can I bring the fullness of myself into every situation? And so that might mean I'm out with friends. That might mean I'm, you know, with people and in relationships that previously have felt challenging, but I can show up without being needy. Like it's not about me. And so at the moment, I'm really just having fun everywhere. Honestly, it's been a big shift and a bit of an adjustment. And I do love sports. said like a true sports. But basically, I've been wanting to join some kind of queer kind of sports league. My partner does swimming. There's like tennis, there's rugby. So watch this space. She'll be getting sporty real soon.
Okay, what about, I feel like a pickleball, maybe.
I've heard good things.
Me too. Yet to try it.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay, maybe. There you
pickleball,
go.
we'll do a podcast on pickleball.
We'll report back once we've investigated further. Now, at the very start of that conversation, you said that you'd come back, you'd met Brahman in Japan, but I think that's because we were talking about Japan. Yeah. Correct.
Did I say Japan?
Yes. And I was like, let's pedal back here because that's going to confuse a few people.
India. I met her in India.
And tell me, we were going to talk about this later, but let's go there now. Can you share for everybody what you were doing in India? And I mean, to call it a transformation is probably putting it lightly, but what happened over there?
So I've been studying meditation quite intensively for the last 5 or so years, and it culminated in this opportunity to become a teacher within this particular tradition, which is called Vedic meditation. And it's a big commitment to become a teacher within the tradition. The training is immersive, and you spend 3 months in India. We're in the south in a place called Tamil Nadu at a ashram called Narayani Peedam. And essentially, it was an opportunity for us, like I said, to immerse ourselves in practice. And so we do a particular technique within the tradition called rounding, where we practice yoga asana, we do some breath work, and then meditation. Afterwards, you kind of lie down for 10 minutes, and then you do it again, and then again. and it's kind of like round and round and round. And the idea behind this particular technique is that we are integrating the state of consciousness that we cultivate in meditation into gentle movement, into breath work, into complete surrender as we lie down. And it's kind of what it's asking us to do is to draw on our least excited state and to bring it into action. And this is exactly what I was talking about before with kind of like the so what of meditation. So what, you can sit down and close your eyes. But how is that meaningful in your life? And kind of putting that to the test, this was kind of the fertile soil from which I built this capability. And, you know, we were with 18 people and beloved teachers, and in the ashram of the environment of the ashram, which was really conducive to that connection, that deep practice. We're kind of held and supported by a principle known as guru. And, you know, oftentimes we think of the guru as a person, but within this tradition, the guru is a principle of steadiness, heaviness. It actually translates as like weight that kind of holds you, and it operates in nature. And so when we were over there, we really had that support so that we could dive deep. And when I was there, it was all kind of relative. I was like, you know, okay, I feel pretty normal. And then coming home, I'm like, I'm totally, totally different in the most beautiful way, and kind of feeling a bit alien in all the situations that I'd found myself in before going, and just slowly integrating. And that's really been the process. It's almost been a year now, which seems wild. We started in June last year. And so, yeah, I mean, as I said, my life has changed exponentially since getting home. And so,
what would have been the most challenging part of that 3 months?
The most challenging part? Oh God. There was like the kind of superficial challenges of like the food, the monotony, and also just not having agency over what I was eating and when I was eating it. And I'm someone that really cares for my body as well. So there's a degree of surrender that's needed when you step into these spaces. And then, you know, on a deeper level, I went with my partner, you know, and it was an individual experience that we were having together. So, you know, we weren't roomed together. We were told, you know, to the best of your ability, allow each other the space to have an individual experience. And there was not only the navigation of that relationship, but all the relationships and the interconnectedness and the, you know, what we call karma, the actions and reactions of our time together in such close proximity, which is both the most healing, incredible experience of connection and love, and simultaneously all your shit comes up. And so it's like really fertile ground to learn how to relate when your shit's coming up, you know, and not make it just about you. It's about the collective. And this was a really valuable experience of like holding my own personal transformation whilst also holding that for others. And, you know, we had a teacher, Laura Poole, who was incredible at holding the space whilst we were there as well. And then the guru as well, Sri Shakti Amma of the ashram. So there was lots of support, but the navigation of those relationships and how we're relating to each other and the difficulties, because, you know, the training requires a lot of memorization. You know, you're reciting particular mantras and you're practicing particular rituals and you're learning particular principles and you're going to teach them. So you need to know them inside out, back to front. And so for a lot of people who hadn't studied in a long time, it was really confronting. And, you know, I also had the aspects of the training which were confronting for me. And so I think it's designed to be like that.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's just in my mind, I imagine it as being the deepest form of personal development that you can possibly undertake.
You just can't escape. It's like you're just stuck in it, you know. And this has been my experience since getting home as well, because, you know, I would go to India and then I would come home and I'd be like, sweet relief, my normal life again. Yeah. And this time when I got home from India, I was in an ashram, which was, you know, essentially a space dedicated to the same guru that I was with in India. And so it was like life was asking me to integrate. And like what really is integration? It's just being in relationship with all layers of yourself simultaneously. And it's like, all right, so we're not taking any breaks anymore. We're dragging all of, you know, your current life circumstances, my current life circumstances, relating dynamics, work, difficulty, and I'm calling the whole thing sadhana. I'm calling the whole thing, you know, spiritual work. Spiritual work is essentially just, again, like I said, coming into relationship with yourself. And so, you know, our life circumstances are bespoke opportunities to grow. They're just for us. It's like, here we go. Here's exactly what you need. And oftentimes we're like, no, I want to grow, but I don't want to grow there. You know? That's not the place where I want to grow. And so the teaching that I've actually been sharing quite a lot more recently is how can we extract wisdom from all circumstances and situations, even though sometimes it feels like they're happening to us, not for us. And they're the most valuable experiences. It's like, you know, you're getting stretched. And when you're getting stretched, it feels like something is going wrong.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. And so a lot of people in those circumstances, they kind of like, oh, that's not the practice actually. When I'm at the yoga studio, when I'm in deep meditative practice, when I'm, you know, when circumstances are favorable and I have capability, that's spiritual work.
Yeah. Or when I'm in control, I imagine as well.
Exactly.
You know, that desire to control the outcome. And, you know, as it relates to this podcast, we talk a lot about the desire to, you know, previously before stepping into a life where you have this transformation, you're looking for things outside of yourself to fix the God-shaped hole or to fill the God-shaped hole. And I imagine that in these practices, it's really teaching you that the answer is within you. And it's not about finding that ease and comfort from something outside of you, which is going to be fleeting anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, we're conditioned, we're taught that the external is going to give us that fulfillment. And so to flip that on its head and to say you are everything that you're searching for it's confronting. And again, we have to put it to the test. Like, so what? With your eyes closed, you've experienced yourself as fulfillment. Now open the eyes and recognize it in everyone else as well. Mm-hmm. And that's the part where it's like, oh God, it's kind of nice in here. You know, that was my experience before going to India. It's kind of nice in here. Maybe I'll just close the eyes and
hang out here for a while.
Hang out. And then it's like, actually start to take that state that you're cultivating out into the external and share it. And so the framework has changed. Instead of me having a need and out there is the fulfillment and I've got to export it to try to fill the God-shaped hole. It's actually in here is the fulfillment and out there's so much need for that fulfillment to be shared.
Yes.
And so this is where stepping into our personal role of service, whatever that may be, is so powerful because we share that fulfillment in whatever way, shape or form it comes naturally to us. You know, what's my individual role in the evolution of all things? And that's your dharma. We call it dharma in our tradition. And this is your service, you know? So,
and that could be to your children, it could be to your partner, it could be to your colleagues, or it could be a calling to be a teacher and share.
Exactly. Oh, I mean, mothers are teachers.
Oh, yes, to my mother.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's role is so valuable, you know, and understanding and accepting your role. I never thought I would end up in an ashram and teaching meditation. I was a performer, you know. I thought I would give by expression, but actually that wasn't my role. And so there was a degree to which I needed to kind of accept, you know, okay, maybe this isn't right for me. The feeling will guide you. Life is always giving you feedback. It's just whether or not you're willing to listen to that feedback. You know what I mean? And so it just comes to a point where it's like, okay, the feedback's strong. I've been ignoring it for a while.
The house is burning down.
The house is literally burning down.
We're fine.
And that's usually when people make the flip. And
totally.
Yeah. Part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a perfect segue into discussing the photo that you have brought along today. Now, we actually have the photo in the room here in real life. So those who are IRL watching along, I'm flashing that up, but we will bring up the photo on the screen now. Kristian, wowzers, can you please describe for our listeners, what am I looking at here in this photo? And what was going on for you at that time in your life when you were hiding behind a smile?
Yeah, so this is a photo of 25-year-old Kristian living in Sydney. He's got the beautiful blonde hair.
The white teeth.
He's got the white teeth. He's got the tan skin.
I mean, he's gorgeous.
He's giving supermodel of the world. And it was a musical theatre headshot. I had just returned from what, for all intensive purposes, would appear like the pinnacle of my career. I had spent some time in the USA working in Cats, the musical. I had then flown straight across to Paris to work in Moulin Rouge.
Wow.
And, you know, that comes with some expectation as a performer who's been promised for a long time, you know, when you make it, then everything will fall into place. This was the idea that I had. And I'd returned home to Sydney. I had got my little headshots done. And, you know, the last thing on my little list of fulfillment from the external was musical theatre show in Australia, a tour, you know, to perform in my home country for my family, for my friends. And so, you know, I'd returned home not really feeling great about the life that I had created for myself, which I expected would make me feel some kind of way. And anyone who is a performer or who travels a lot for work will know that the sense of transience, of moving from place to place, of constantly changing, whether that's the external circumstances, whether that's the role you're playing, because, you know, in dance and as a performer, you're constantly a different role. You know, you're acting, but you're also changing casts. So you have this really intense period of like 6 months of like rehearsals and performing and then touring, and you just become this really tight-knit family. And when it's international, because I was touring and working internationally in musical theatre, it's like disperse. And oftentimes, you try to stay in contact, but a lot of those people are going into new families like I was and immersing themselves in new relationships. And, when I was 18, that was really fun. And then when I hit 25 and I'd returned home, I was really longing for depth, intimacy, groundedness, a romantic relationship, close friendships that felt purposeful. And so I really just felt really alone. Like in that picture, the feeling inside is just isolated. I'm the only one having this experience. Everyone else in musical theatre and performing is having a great time. You have this idea that you're the only one that's suffering. What's wrong with me? And then also, it's so funny lately in the meditation, the group meditations I've been running, I've been talking a lot about mantra. Mantra are these sounds that we repeat, and they're really powerful in changing the resonance of the vibration in our body. And actually, we're chanting mantra all the time. And this is the thing. It's like, what mantra was I chanting? I'm not good enough. That was the mantra that I was chanting to myself over and over again as this 25-year-old back in Australia. And the belief I'm not good enough was coming from a place of, I thought that when I received these job offers and entered these contracts, that I would finally feel whole, that everything would fall into place. But actually, that expectation plus the reality, which, and I'm not going to say it was all negative. There was some beautiful relationships and experiences, but it never felt like a sense of, there was no continuity. It was like really immersive, really close, and then end. Really immersive, really close, and then end. And that cutoff was just like, And so that mantra that I was repeating to myself, it was starting to impact my mental health. The way I was relating in relationships. I was in an intimate relationship at that time, which kind of, as soon as I got this headshot and started auditioning, just my personal mental state, in the process of deteriorating, was impacting all of those around me. And so my feeling of inner isolation was starting to be expressed in the external as well. And so, that relationship deteriorated. I ended up very kind of serendipitously getting employed in Evita the Musical, which had Tina Arena in it. We love Tina Arena.
We love Tina.
I'm in chains. And my dad's a massive fan.
Stop it.
Hilarious. And so I actually grew up listening to her.
Amazing.
And it was a real like full circle moment. I jumped into that musical, and honestly, that musical, I was like holding on because it was the only thing that was motivating me at that point.
Wow.
It was like, thank God I got that job. Because when the relationship deteriorated and I felt so alone, at least I had something that got me out of bed.
A purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kept me holding on. And then, I was kind of deeply grieving during the Sydney portion. We were performing at the Opera House, which was incredible. A dream come true.
Literally.
It was. I remember opening night, like, I'm getting shivers now. Just feeling overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude and love. Like my family had flown down. All of my friends were in the audience. And I was stepping on stage with some friends in the cast. That was a really beautiful experience. And then outside of the show, I was just a hot mess.
What does Kristian in a hot mess look like?
What does it look like? It looks like a lot of kind of seeking of external validation, being newly single and that being quite novel as well, like on the apps, gamifying it, not really seeing the correlation between the usage of my phone and my mental health, just not really understanding, not understanding what I was eating was impacting me, not understanding that, I am doing 12 shows a week, probably should do more conditioning and take care of my body. I was teaching yoga and I was quite new at this point. And it was very much about the yoga asana. So lots of striving there as well, just imprinting this kind of like how do I make myself good enough into everything that I was doing, which is really painful.
You just got that whip out the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Exhausting.
was harsh and exhausting. Yeah. And then kind of cut to touring to Melbourne. We were performing at the Arts Centre. And I started teaching at Melbourne studios, and there was a feeling that the yoga was a bit different. The people that were teaching it were a bit older, a bit more experienced. You know, I was like considered a senior teacher after teaching 2 years, and they were asking me to run teacher trainings, and I was like, I'm a baby, you know?
Totally.
And so I came to Melbourne, and I just was like, sigh of relief. There are some elders in the yoga space. And I also found the connection to Melbourne people so refreshing, so engaging. Sydney as a city is a bit more transient, just the nature of like,
I agree.
Yeah, the work load that's required to be able to afford the housing that you live in. It's like 100%. It's a hustle.
Yeah.
It's a hustle, and there's more competition in the dance world as well. So I came down to Melbourne, and it just felt like a sigh of relief, an exhale, a opportunity to connect. And I did. I fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the people, and I started teaching. Luckily, the studio I was teaching at in Sydney actually had a sister studio in Melbourne. So I just kind of transitioned.
Was it powerlifting?
No, it was One Hot Yoga.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did teach at powerlifting as well, and I just started doing more yoga and liking it as a student. Like it was a real like, oh, I feel so good when I do this. And then I started teaching at a studio with teachers that I really respected, which kind of made me present and also up the amount of maybe time spent preparing for these classes, the care with the students. And so it became less about me. You know, in Sydney, it felt like poor me, isolated me. You know, I was so stuck in self-concern. And coming to Melbourne, it was like, wow, there's so many role models here. There's a job that I care about with people that I care about. I found it really easy to make friends. Everything just felt really easy. And
in flow.
Exactly.
Right.
It was like a big yes from nature. And so as the contract wrapped up, I actually auditioned for Chicago. Got right to the end. That was like a tall cast, short cast situation is usually what happens.
Right.
Me being a giant. And we got towards, you know, crunch time, which is where they send out all the kind of offers. And a few of my friends had received offers. And, you know, one of my friends who was on the panel was like, you're going to get it. And I was like, oh, cool. So I've got it.
Oh, no.
I know. He was like, I've never seen you dance like that. You were incredible.
Oh.
And I had said to myself, you know, when the offers started to come out and I wasn't put on hold, I was like, you know what? If I don't get this, I think I'm just going to teach yoga. I was like, I'm really loving what I'm doing, you know. At this time, Nova had reached out from Warrior One. There's like the wheels were starting to turn, and I was getting offered, you know, they had come to One Hot, Dustin and Nova together. They had done my class.
Wow.
I remember that class. It was packed. There was like 45 people in the hot room. Oh my God. Yeah, it was actually really fun. And then they announced the cast. I didn't get it. And it was a dream show for me, but it was a very clear piece of feedback. You know, what's needed here for your evolution? It's actually not more touring and more performing and more transients. It's actually the thing that feels good. And so this idea of wanting to perform, it was an intellectual construct of me being valuable and all the ideas of success that was still kind of turning in my head, even though the feedback I was getting inside, like the person in that picture was not happy, was living a dysfunctional life, feeling really separate and isolated. And so life kind of made it a non-negotiable, which I'm so grateful for in hindsight. At the time, I was very sad. I was kind of grieving what felt like the end of a career. And then, yeah, I stepped into yoga.
Tell me about that. For some reason, the words that come to mind there are ego death. And I don't mean to say that as you were a highly egotistical person and then your ego died. I don't mean it like that at all. I mean, you know, understanding the work that goes into being a professional dancer. It's years. It's, you know, that I'm imagining that started in childhood as a dream. And then, as you said, that was the way that you learnt how to receive love and external validation. So there was, you know, it was so much more in that moment than simply saying, I'm going to hang up my dancing shoes and become a yoga teacher. Like there was a complete shift in identity that happened there.
Exactly, yeah. And so the ego being my attachment to the identity as a performer and what I felt that delivered me. And there was a death there for sure. It was like, you know, especially with performing, you know, the cast is announced and it's all very public and it's like, look how successful I am. You know, every time it came through, it felt really good and then it felt really not good straight away.
Yes.
It's a bizarre feeling.
Yes.
And so, you know, especially to like see my friends being announced and you know, feeling again not good enough.
I was just thinking that little
isolated. The same
critic.
thing.
Yeah.
But the same.
Like, see.
The same exact feeling that I had when I had the shows.
Yeah.
So it's like it's actually not.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
It's not the show.
It's not the show.
It's not the show. And so I distinctly remember doing a photo shoot actually the day that I decided that I was going to become, you know, a full-time yoga teacher in Melbourne. And I was like crying. I was crying. I was grieving and I was letting myself grieve. It felt like a real, like an acceptance of what was being shown to me and how I was being guided. And that felt really powerful, you know, and yoga is movement, yoga is expression, but it's on your terms. It's like, it's holistic in that it's not emulate exactly what I need you to emulate exactly when I need you to emulate it. Express exactly what I need you to express when I need you to express it. It's like, feel how you are, be with that in a way that acknowledges the full spectrum of human experience, which is like, you know, you arrive to practice and you're in pain and you're grieving and you're sad. Let that be expressed. Let that be welcome. And so there was a shift in my practice from imprinting a style of performing the yoga into a real holistic approach of inclusion. Like inclusivity is one of the pillars of Vedic yoga, the company that I run. And it's like, it's not just about the identities we're including. It's about the parts of ourselves that we're neglecting, you know, shining the light on those things, making them welcome because, you know, what we resist persists. That's the truth. And so there's this beautiful poem written by Vasant Lad in a book called Strands of Eternity. And he says, you know, the emotions that you allow to flower and bloom fully, they die a really natural death, you know. But if you're resisting, pushing away, suppressing, repressing, whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to fight for its life. It's going to fight for its life. And so this experience of starting to acknowledge, you know, a 3-dimensional perspective of myself that allows me to look behind me and see my shadow, that allows me to look forward and see light and doesn't see them as separate. There's no line between them. They blur into one another. This was a really powerful experience of kind of the beginnings of my healing journey, I would say, even though I was already teaching yoga for a few years.
I get it though, you know, even in my own teaching, I'm growing so much year on year, and therefore my teaching is evolving, and it's less about me and more about the students and the space and yoga as a whole. I still remember to this day when I was doing my yoga teacher training, and my jaw would just hit the floor every time I saw the similarities between the yamas and niyamas and the 12-step fellowships and the 12 traditions and the 12 principles. And I'm thinking, what the hell? Like it is, because I remember when I first met you, I was practicing yoga as a form of physical fitness. That's just what I thought. I was like, I need to get a workout in. I'm going to go do yoga. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you start to wake up and more is revealed. And now it's just, it's the way I choose to move through life, and it is a complete evolution. Tell me, what has it been that has been revealed to you in that process? And particularly over the last 5 years, because I, as a student of yours, have seen how your classes and your teachings have evolved and changed. What's it been like for you internally?
Yeah, it's kind of what you already said, this process of letting go of self-concern, I want to be a really good teacher. And that's coming from a place of love. I'm just wanting to do my best for these students and really being like, what's actually needed? That's the main, and I teach it quite a lot, tuning in to the feedback you're getting from your body and from your life and being like, not what do I want, but what's actually needed. That's the shift. And so I step in front of the class and honestly, I don't really care what comes out. It's not about that. It's me looking out and seeing, okay, where are people at? Like, where are people at right now? And how can I meet that? And, you navigate that as you continue to teach and as your perceptual acuity is able to pick up on what's actually needed. When I started, I had an idea of what was needed. And now my direct perception is much clearer. And I also, and this has been something that I've really been honing since getting back from India, being open to verbal feedback and really receiving verbal feedback. It's like, I can pretend like I know everything that everyone needs, but they're going to tell you. And so how is it that we can become present enough, because there's so many stories around feedback that can be really painful.
Yeah, and challenging and hard to receive.
Yeah. And so how is it that I can let the stories be there, right? Be open to the feedback, not only that I'm receiving from a person, but also from my body, from life, and really start to implement, okay, what's needed. And you just come back to this over and over and over again. And as you do, it gets more and more refined. And what you end up delivering gets actually more and more nourishing because you're not having to conceive of it from your individuality. It's like the whole of nature is supporting. You're not feeling depleted after classes because you feel like, the individual has had to structure this class and teach this class and be really kind of attentive. It's rather like a kind of an opening. And, I used to teach a lot more. I do teach a lot, but now it's kind of more eclectic. Like what I offer is broader. But I have a lot of capacity to teach because I feel more like a conduit for the teachings. Like they don't belong to me. They come through me in a unique style. And that's, my dharma and your dharma is to share the same wisdom in a way that's going to hit different people that resonate. And so really getting out of the way and allowing that and connecting, this has been really powerful as well, connecting to something bigger, whatever it is. It can be a teacher, it can be a lineage, it can be nature, it can be your highest value, which can be love, relationship, it can be, the way you feel when you look at your child, all of these things that energize us. And you bring that to your teaching. So the main difference is that, like you said, less self-concern and then more refining of my ability to detect what's needed and then doing that.
Can I ask you about, I want to kind of weave in, this idea of non-striving that we see within yoga and how you have developed your relationship with this principle, because as a professional dancer, I'm going to imagine that you have maybe just a little bit of a type A perfectionistic streak to you. Tell me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
Yeah, totally. Me too, right? And therefore, that can come onto the mat. We can strive and push in our own practice, and how complicated can we make this flow or this sequence? And again, I've really noticed that because you as a practitioner, you are freaky with what you can do with your body. And, you can be upside down and inside out and around and around, and it's incredible to witness. But I see you doing a lot less of that now. And I know it's not because you can't, but there's a different relationship now. Share more about that.
Yeah. So definitely come from the striving, the efforting, and the biggest shift was in meditation, the implementation of my meditation practice, and the surrendering of the ideas of what I thought people needed, you know. And it's not to say that no one needs strong asana, but it's to say that most people are living strong lives. So most people don't need that. But there is a time and a place for it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of the training, movement training that I do outside of yoga has a lot of that in it. And it's to create a steadiness, right? A real groundedness in the physical body that lets me hold the big energy. And so the more I build that, the more I become a conduit for more energy and the more I can channel it really clearly without it impacting my physiology. I see this a lot, meditators who don't move their bodies, who end up with a lot of physical ailments as a result of only surrendering. And surrendering is so important, but cultivating the capability, what we call sthira in the yoga practice, the steadiness and strength, that's so valuable. And so, you know, this shift for me came kind of primarily from rounding, which is a really different approach to yoga asana. It's not quite yin where you're doing nothing. It's not quite slow flow. It's like if slow flow and yin had a little baby. And it's what it's asking us to do is to tune into the subtlety of what's here. You know, there's such a richness and a fullness in each moment. And when we're caught up in getting more, achieving more, doing more, we negate that. And so what I kind of sensed as I continue to evolve as a teacher is that what people need is a space where they can cultivate what we call sukshma and viveka. Sukshma is this real refined ability to detect the subtle, and viveka is that discernment, like what's actually happening within the subtle, and how can I navigate the feedback that I'm getting to make the choices that feel most appropriate. And so, you know, as I continued to teach, it just very naturally happened that I put in less effort and got more out of my practice actually. And that's what I feel like people need more. And especially as the impact of our phones, the state of the world, the compounded stress and fatigue that's building in the collective, what's really needed in the yoga spaces is a sense of safety and agency. And then when that's cultivated, the ability to surrender into your essence nature, which if you're striving can be quite hard to do in my experience, not impossible, but harder. You know, asana in my experience, it moves energy. And when energy moves, it kind of shimmers and you get this feeling in Shavasana of like your whole body vibrating or shimmering. You've had it before after a really hard class. It's beautiful. Best. Yeah. It's called Spanda Shakti. It's the feeling of aliveness. And when the energy is moved and you find stillness, it kind of almost like the blockages kind of, they get removed and what's revealed is your nature. I think the major problem is that we don't spend enough time in that part. The stillness. Because the stillness transmutes the stuck energy. So what happens is there's a revelation and a dissolution. But usually in a class, it's like a revelation and then straight back into action. And so what happens is the curtains just get closed again.
Yeah. And then you walk out of the studio and pick up your phone and you're straight into the,
there's such a strong juxtaposition between life and yoga. And 1 hour is just not enough to realize the self.
Unfortunately not.
But it is enough to create transformation for sure. And with continuity and the right teacher, absolutely. But, you know, I don't have to try as hard to do the same asanas that I used to do before. You know, I can do all the asanas and probably more now with much less effort. It's wild.
Yeah. And what you've described so beautifully there is really something that I share a lot in class with my students is what you're practicing here, what you're cultivating here are the lessons and skills and techniques that you then take out into the world. Like you said that, you know, people often say to me, Ash, how do I become more intuitive? And I'm like, it's through these practices. We learn to do it in meditation or we learn to do it on the yoga mat so that we can then firstly, burn through whatever fire needs to be burnt through, and then free ourselves and create that spaciousness and that connection to self, which we then take out into the world.
And this is the power of meditation, because, you know, how do I become more intuitive when I'm really stressed and really tired? It's hard. It's really hard. You know, you're, like you said, burning through that fire, the things that need to be processed within, the compounded stress of time gone by. You know, it comes to a point where you can't ignore it anymore and manifests as disease in the body, right? And that's a lot of the time when people are like waking up to the fact that what they're doing is unsustainable. And I feel very, very grateful and very, very lucky that I was guided into these practices before such things happen. But there was still so much stress, so much stress. You know, I often share that I didn't like meditation when I started it.
And this is what we hear so often, right? You know, so many of my clients, I'll say, you know, have you tried meditation? They say, I'm not good at it. Can you please debunk the myths around meditation? Starting with, I'd love you to share, because you talk about this so beautifully, you know, this idea that meditation is a practice where you need to be free from thought.
Yeah. Common misconceptions or subtle expectations that actually underlie a lot, even meditation teachers, a lot of kind of ideas around meditation is that if I'm not relaxed and if I'm not thought free and if I'm not feeling, you know, gratification, this is the big one. If I'm not feeling gratification, then I'm not doing the practice of meditation. Actually, meditation is the practice of being with yourself as you are. Whether that's gratifying or ungratifying is totally irrelevant. And a lot of the time when we're experiencing meditations that are uncomfortable, we're actually, like you said, working through the compounded stress. And we kind of feel into a flavor of that as it comes up to come out. But oftentimes we see it as coming in and happening to us. You know, these thoughts, they're coming from somewhere out there and they're coming into my experience and they're disturbing my meditation, which is inner peace. Actually, no. As your body kind of intuitively senses that enough rest has been had here, you know, we have two functions in the parasympathetic nervous system. One of them is digest. And so when we've had enough rest, it's like actually what's needed here is the burning up of these stresses, the letting go. And when they are burnt up, we feel into the residue of them. They rise to the surface. And the invitation is to let them be, because what you resist, like we said, persists. So to continue to allow that process is actually to come into relationship with all parts of who you are. And that is so well integrated. Like living your daily life and having some tumultuous emotions, interactions, relating experiences, and being like, that's okay. It allows you to process them and let them go, which is really valuable. And it actually means, you know, a common misconception here is that I'm going to become indifferent or apathetic in life. Like I'm going to become totally disconnected. Actually, you get plugged in further, right? You feel more. There's greater sensitivity. And in that, you're able to navigate with greater skill, right? Because like we've been saying all class, there's less self-concern. There's more the ability to meet the need of the other, because you know there's no separation here anyway. You and me, we want the same things. And if I have the resources to give it to you, I'm going to give it to you. Because what? We're not separate. Right? Your happiness is my happiness.
So that brings me to the thought around, has this practice enabled you to become a more compassionate, loving and tolerant person? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's all a byproduct of coming into relationship with yourself. You know, I see this very often and have experienced this myself. Let's just give the prime example of road rage.
Yes, I think we've all been there.
You know, someone does something on the road and you're like, how could you? I would never. And then you find yourself in a circumstance where the shoe is on the other foot.
Totally.
And you're like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You know? And in that moment, having the understanding of probably what the other person is feeling, it might not be, I'm so sorry. It might be, I'm so stressed. I actually just have blinders on. I have no idea what's happening around me. Like that person is suffering.
Yes.
And this is the hurt people thing. You know, it's this idea that anyone who is acting in a way that's destructive or unsustainable, they themselves are suffering deeply. And you have to go through the process of dismantling that within yourself to be able to be compassionate in another. And this is why the people that have gone through so much suffering, you know, they're so wildly compassionate, so beautifully understanding, so patient, so loving. And it's not to say that that has to be the case. You can definitely become jaded if there's a misunderstanding or a misperception of what's happening, you know, turning into the victim. And you know, that's a product of the conditioned mind and the way that we've been taught to live. And so I also have compassion for that. But it's like all these qualities that you're mentioning, they're actually really natural.
They're in all of us.
They're in all of us.
It's just the capacity to access.
Capacity to access and how they're being concealed. And so there's actually a really prominent kind of dysfunction within the queer community, which I'm a part of, which is like, I want to make it look like I'm doing the right thing, saying the right thing. I don't want to be perceived in a negative light. I know I should feel compassionate for that person, but I don't, but I'm going to force it anyway. You know, we call this virtue signaling, where I'm trying to signal to other people that I have this virtue. That requires so much energy. It is so exhausting. I know, because I did it for a long time. And so as you continue to practice and as you come into relationship with these parts of yourself which feel broken, dysfunctional, dark, you know, you accept them more and more. And so when you begin to recognize them within the other, you know what the root of it is. And it's usually fear, you know. So much of the destructive action that happens in this world is born from a misunderstanding. Like, something's unknown, therefore I'm afraid, therefore let's shut it down. And so meditation seeks to expand awareness to include more and more. It comes back to inclusivity, actually. If we can include all those parts of ourselves internally, when we are reflected, you know, those experiences by another, it's like we can just be that beautiful mirror. This is what you turn into actually when you're present. And when someone is, you know, engaging in unsustainable behavior and you're able to receive it, immediately what happens is they have to look back at themselves if you're not reacting, which is also a skill.
Absolutely.
We're all in process.
Yes, exactly. Progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
So tell me then, how has this work changed the way that you show up in your intimate relationship? Because you are in a very loving, intimate relationship with Jaden, who we've mentioned, master magic massage hands for anyone who's in Melbourne. And, you know, I as an observer see how beautiful and loving that relationship is, and it's wonderful to see. But I know that you're a different version from perhaps 5, 10, even to say, let's say 10 years ago, you know, that, or the person I'm looking at here in this photo, you know, I'm imagining was showing up in a very different way and was looking for different things. You know, I need you to make me feel whole, therefore I'm going to be this and that. So can you expand on that a little bit more and how that's changed as a result of these practices?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just want to be preface what I'm about to say with intimate relationships is where all of your shit comes up.
100%.
So by no means is my relationship perfect. Jaden, if you're watching, I love you. And that's how they're designed.
Yeah.
Karmically, we come into relationship with the people that help us to resolve and dissolve all the ways that we're not in alignment with our highest values. And so for some people that's less intense, and for others it's more intense. The way I used to show up in relationships is very much what you were saying, like this seeking of fulfillment through the relationship, the misunderstanding that I could get a sense of wholeness if I was united with the other permanently. What I'm coming to understand as, you know, I mature in this relationship of 5 years, that the appreciation of our own unique qualities and the space for them to be expressed fully, that's what creates love, actually. The recognition of sameness while also the celebration of diversity. It's like we want the same things, but we don't want them in the same way. And so I think one of the biggest things, which I'm still navigating, is how can I let my partner be their most authentic self, and how can I support that, uplift that, celebrate that, and at the same time, maybe my values and what I want require different action. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And, you know, there is definitely an alignment with values, but the action taken is sometimes different. And, you know, there's this famous saying, I'm sure you've heard it before, where a man was interviewed, he'd been with his wife for 70 years, and the interviewer said, "How did you do it? How were you with the same woman for 70 years? And he was like, "I haven't been with the same woman. She's changed. We've both changed." And so giving the relationship the opportunity to have another iteration, right? And this is where it becomes hard if you're not doing some kind of work to evolve or just to get on board with the evolution that's already happening. Let's be real. You can't really control it. But if you are stuck in the ever repeating known, if you're contracted and trying to live in the same way and emulate the same experiences, that relationship, you know, you're going to outgrow it or they're going to outgrow it. But this idea of this, you know, man saying that we're totally different people and at different stages of our life, we became those people and we let each other become those people. And what's actually required in that is space. And, you know, so once a year I do a Vipassana where I go to a 10-day retreat. Jaden has 10 days by himself.
Yes, you went recently.
Yeah, in Jan. It was a lot. And then he goes up and travels to Sydney and Brisbane to give massages and teach meditation. And so, you know, as the relationship has evolved, so has our appreciation for space and the recognition that, you know, I love you. I really do. But actually the cliche space makes the heart grow fonder of that, like coming together and moving away and coming together and moving away. And that's what happens in all relating dynamics. And so why can't that happen in our intimate relationships as well? And for a lot of people, it happens naturally with work. Just so happens that me and Jaden work together, live together, like we have the same friends. And so for us, it's like it needs to be a bit more conscious, creating that space so that we can have a dynamic of being colleagues, housemates, friends, and lovers. And how can we prioritize, you know, lover and beloved as a bar of a feeling tone that we imbibe together? Like it needs to be a priority. And so assuming these different roles and just making sure that we're knowing, okay, at this moment we're colleagues. Maybe tonight we should be lovers.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we should go out for dinner.
Yeah.
And so really understanding the intricacies and nuances of relationships just through the awareness that meditation and yoga cultivates. It just helps me to see. And sometimes that seeing is painful and sometimes it's lovely. Yeah.
Tell me, how has your relationship with the material world changed? Because I feel like, you know, someone might meet you and hear that you live in an ashram and that you're a meditation teacher, and one might make up that means that you have no needs and that you know, not interested into the material world. And I don't actually know this about you. So I'm asking out of a point of curiosity, you know, where do you, and things like, you know, drinking alcohol and being that kind of part of you, because you're still a young man and you have different needs and wants. And I'm just wondering, like, where does that all meet for you at this point in time, knowing that it could change and evolve again?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually something that I've been navigating more and more, getting back. Like I said, I'm putting myself out there in ways that kind of help to answer the question, so what? Like, what is this practice actually doing for me? More and more as I practice, it's less about what I'm doing, right? It's less about that and more about how I'm doing it. And so I used to very much like curate my life, especially when I started meditation. It's like, you know, Advaita Vedanta has a very puritanical perspective. Purify, 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 you know, and it's needed. It's needed. As we go in and as we're holding so much in the body, what's actually needed is what we call a sattvic lifestyle, where we're not consuming toxins, where we're caring for our bodies, where we're, you know, eating things that are like medicine. And if you're swinging the pendulum all the way out into what's actually a cultural norm of dysfunction and disease and, you know, just the things that we put in our body and the things that we do to our body, totally unsustainable. And so for me, it was like a swinging in the other direction. And lately I've been working more with Kashmir Shaivism, which is Tantra. And Tantra yoga is all about integration. And so it's kind of taking the pendulum and putting it back in the center. And it's not to say that I have to be perfect, right? It's to say that I have to be balanced. And so what is balance? Balance isn't a still point. It's not one thing. Okay, now I'm balanced, stay. It's the ability to detect in each moment when I'm moving out of balance. And the sooner I can detect, the sooner I can correct. And so the choices that I make now are more conscious. And so I can consciously swing out into celebration, let's say. And that might look like eating things that aren't great, that I know aren't going to nourish me, in a mode of celebration that tastes good and that lead to a shared experience of love. That's my priority. So this is where the how and the what, it's like the what isn't so important anymore, but how am I showing up in those situations?
And the intention behind it. And
exactly.
I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about alcohol consumption, and, the World Health Organization has come out saying that there is no safe amount. Whereas this guy was saying that, well, we need to take more into consideration than just the toxicity of ethanol. And he was saying, one standard drink, if taken with a loved one in ritual, maybe it's your Friday night thing, it's one glass of wine when you're sitting in the backyard watching the sunset, the connection and the love that is being created almost counters the toxicity of the, So yeah, it is really about just finding that balance.
Finding the balance, and for who, when, it's always that, because it's like not everyone is going to be able to do that and feel that. You know what I mean?
Or even have one drink. I certainly couldn't.
Yeah.
Not going to work for me.
Exactly. And it's like, it's constitutionally what's right for you. And some people need more structure. I'm a very, in times gone by, I've been very structured. And so now I'm playing in the gray area, and it is harder to navigate and it requires more skill. And so I say, I let myself tip off balance. And it's not to say that I always detect quickly, or maybe it's to say that I am intentionally allowing myself to go even further. And then that has repercussions. And so there's always learning. It's and our role, our role here in the process of learning is also to experience love and joy. I don't want to be the perfect yogi.
No.
And my understanding of the yoga fundamentally is actually that it helps us to be in the world but not of the world. So it's like, I'm out there enjoying life, savoring these shared experiences, open to love in whatever form it comes. And then of course there's going to be boundaries around, how do I nourish myself and care for myself so I can show up in those ways? And so when you feel like that's being compromised, then maybe there's a learning that's going to be implemented, a boundary, around, and boundaries are always there to increase love. Like I can't show up in a loving way anymore. So what's actually needed from me is a boundary so that we can still be in love. This can still be a loving relationship. And then, the boundary is also always porous. I'm always open to changing that boundary. And so, yeah. And then eventually the highest vision is that there is no boundaries. This is the highest vision because you're constantly present, and the present is always telling you what's needed. Does that make sense? But I'm not quite there.
Yeah, let me know when you get there.
Not quite enlightened just yet.
I'll be scuttling along behind you.
Yeah. We'll try.
Show me the way.
We try our best.
Oh my goodness, Chrissy, I have just loved this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you all day long, but we are going to finish up with one final question. And the question that I ask all of my guests is, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Yeah, I mean, they're very simple. And this is the thing with a lot of the practices is actually they feel so simple that you're like a little suspicious.
Is it working?
I'm a little suspicious of how simple this is. The first is meditation. And when I say meditation, I want to be clear. Anything that promotes a deepening of the relationship with the self, all layers of the body from gross to subtle, and promotes rest. So that doesn't have to be, sitting with an upright spine with your hands in a mudra and no thoughts. It could be lying down for yoga nidra. You know what I mean? Like, let's just make it accessible, non-negotiable, twice a day. The second is movement. And that can come in the form of yoga. At the moment, just because of the amount of change in my life and the amount of energy moving through at the ashram with the practices I'm doing, the amount I'm teaching, I'm actually needing to hold. So it's weightlifting at the moment. And that always changes, you know, what's needed. But at the moment, what's needed is a big holding energy. So I need to grow my body, especially because I spent a time, you know, very sattvic, very introspective. So yeah, movement. And then the third is food. Like non-negotiable, I have to cook food. Like it needs to be cooked either by me or by someone that loves me. And, you know, me and my partner now prioritize where we source our food, how we cook our food, you know, all these things that felt maybe like a luxury in the past that I couldn't afford, but now feel like a priority. And it's not to say that they're not a luxury. You know, I do have privilege in ways that allow me to access nourishing food that's grown locally. And for that, I'm super grateful. And I'm in a position to be able to afford that. And, you know, rest, movement, and food as medicine and nourishment, like they're so fundamental to my life. And every single day, these are the things that I come back to time and time again. I know you said only 3, but 4. Community, people, connection.
Yeah.
Like I can't get by without my peeps.
What is it about community? Because I know you're so passionate about this, and, you know, it's really what you do at the ashram, and you have incredible sessions that people can attend. What is it for someone who perhaps, you know, is dipping their toe into meditation but is a bit maybe intimidated by the whole thing? What would they get out of coming to the space and actually meditating in a group setting? Yeah,
I mean, you get to ride the collective. So you get to drop in to a co-regulated space. And the intention of my community and the priority of my community is safety. You know, I want people to be able to arrive in any state. You don't have to be relaxed. This is the biggest misconception. It's like, oh, I don't feel good, I shouldn't go to group med tonight. It's like, actually, yes, you should.
You need to be here.
Well, it's just, you know, we have this idea of how we have to show up for other people based on expectations that were placed on us by parents, role models, friends. And especially in today's culture where it's kind of like, it's like, oh, I can't handle this, or I can't deal with you, or, you know, because people have such limited resources, such limited inner resources. But the reason that I've been prioritizing my practice and the reason I'm able to show up for my community is because I've created a life that allows me to support not only myself but others. And if you become a part of a community, it's reciprocity in action. You give and you receive, and when you don't have anything to give, you come and you just receive. Does that make sense? And then in coming, when you have capability, you'll see another person who maybe doesn't, and then you'll give to them. And through the giving, what you're giving has to move through you. So it has to be conceived by you, which means you get to experience the love, joy, generosity. You give it to the other, and then you get the feedback of how it's uplifted them. So it's threefold. And this is why service is such a powerful part of community. It's like that reciprocity, it seems like give and take, but you get so much more, you know? And some of the things that you get are lessons, and they're so valuable as well, even though they might be painful.
I love that. That is such a perfect place to wrap up this conversation today. Chrissy, if people want to understand more about meditation or perhaps track you down, come to practice, where should they go?
Where should they go? That's a good question. So I teach at Warrior One on a Monday morning. And I've got some covers. I teach at Yoga Life in Albert Park on a Sunday morning, which has an open community meditation at 7:30 a.m. That's a bit early for a Sunday, but come on down. And then 2 classes after that. So they're my group classes at the moment. I'm hoping to expand my schedule. And then I run a monthly Learn to Meditate course out of the ashram. And we run free group medis on the weekends, on Sundays. And then we do sporadic community events. So if you just jump on the website, vedicyoga.com.au. And also we have an Instagram, vedicyoga.au, and just all our stuff's up there. And you can just reach out, you know.
Awesome. I'll make sure I pop all of that info in the episode show notes. Kristian, we say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one need suffer in silence. So I just cannot thank you so much for coming here today, for sharing your story and taking the time to be here.